So instead of actually having to put this connect component here, I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to use a method called connect that comes with a library, which is called React Redux. And you can take a look for it here. Here's sort of a quick start of how we're going to use it. Again, we're going to use it from the CDN. Eventually, we'll end up putting it in our files that'll end up getting put together and transpiled by Webpack and Babel. But the idea here is that there's a method called connect, and you could pass in two functions that will end up getting called. And all of our subscribing and unsubscribing are going to end up getting taken care of for us. But this component is going to be our presentational component. And it's going to magically, not magically, it's similar to what Connect does, but it's going to have the appropriate prop sent down to it. So how do we use it? Well, one of the things that we're going to have to do here is that we're going to have to bring in two things. We're going to have to bring in provider and connect from React Redux. So I'm going to go over here and bring these in. And this is going to be provider. And this is going to be connect. And provider is capitalized because it's actually a component. And this is from React Redux, which I brought in up here as a CDN. And the first thing I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to go to my app, and I'm going to wrap this whole thing in a provider. Now, if I just ended up doing that, what's going to end up happening when I go to run this is the provider is going to tell me, hey, look, well, I'm running into a couple of problems here. One of the problems that I'm running into is that I'm going to need to make sure that my provider ends up having a store. And so it can't get state of undefined. My provider ends up needing a store. So I'm going to tell my provider, your store is store. And let's move this over. Let's refresh this again. And we're going to run into some other issues here. So really, there's a few things that I want to do here. I'm going to build these out a little bit at a time. What I'm going to end up doing with this is that the syntax is slightly different. And what I'm going to end up doing, I could start out with nav here. If you ever want to comment out some code here, always fine. This is one way to end up doing it. So here, I'm just going to start out with my nav. And what I'm going to end up doing with my nav, I've got my nav component here. I was console logging location. And this is underscore nav. So what I want to do is I want to create a connected component. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to call connect. And with connect, I can end up passing in a function. This function is called map state to props. So once I have this connect set up, I could end up putting in nav. It's a little bit different syntax than what we ended up doing. But what this allows me to do, and I'm going to put this on another line here. Again, if this is in separate files, I'll end up naming these things. But what connect allows me to do is that it will automatically, again, it knows about the store. So you have to have your provider and your store. But what's going to happen here is the state is going to end up getting passed in here. And this is going to be the state of my store. And I can end up returning, all I really need is people. So I'm going to say people is state.people. And I could end up deconstructing that as well. And let's just see if our nav ends up showing up, which it does. Let's now do the same thing, because this is almost identical here. Let's do it with home, which is going to be wrapped around home. And again, the idea here is that we're basically saying here's now a component and we want it to end up interacting with the Redux store. And we'll do one more of these. This is going to be people. And this is going to be the people component. So it could feel like a little bit more work here, but then again, I don't have to write this connect component. And there's also some advantages too, is that I could send down to this component whatever I want to end up sending down to it. So I can massage this data as I end up sending it down. That's something that we could end up taking a look at in a second. But what I'm going to end up doing here is, let's actually go and get these buttons back, excuse me, these other components back. And I'm going to refresh, and this is also going to work. The other advantage when I was talking about massaging data, and you could do this for any of these components really, is that my nav doesn't actually need the people. In fact, none of my components do at this point. They will eventually. One of the things that I could do is I could massage this data, and I could say, well, I'm just going to send, I'm going to call this count. And this is going to be state.people.length. So I have the ability to send to my component. This is what this map state to props gives you the ability to do. Now when I go up to nav, instead of catching people, I'm going to catch count. And I don't have to do a length. I could just do count. So what you get the ability to do is to really massage the data that's coming from your store. Again, this is the state of your store. And we could also, one of the things that's pretty common is to just destructure this right here and say, hey, look, we're really only interested in people. And we could end up just saying the count is going to be people.length. And I could even destructure it here. So this is a little bit of syntactic sugar. And this way I could just return this object, do the same thing here. And everything should still be working. So the main sort of takeaway here is that we've got really a chance to massage the data from the store, pass it really in any format that we want to, and pass it to these components. And next up, we'll look at some other advantages that that React Redux allows us to do.